The royal command, the royal hall of planet Philara was silent. High walls of glowing crystal reflected the light of 2 moons. Alien nobles stood in a wide circle, heads bowed, their silver robes moving gently with the cold wind blowing in from the mountains. At the center stood Princess Lyra, her green skin glowing under the palace lights. Her silver hair fell over her shoulders like a river of light, but her face was hard, cold, angry. The High Counselor stepped forward, holding a scroll sealed with gold. "The war is over," he announced. "The treaty is signed. To prove our loyalty to peace, Princess Lyra will marry a human." A wave of whispers moved through the nobles. Lyra's eyes turned sharp. "A human?" she repeated. "You want me to marry a creature from a death world?" The counselor nodded. "The human chosen is named Jace, a soldier from Earth. The humans believe this bond will keep both sides loyal to peace." Lyra's hands turned into fists. "They're animals, dirty, weak. Why should I marry one?" But it didn't matter what she said. The command came from her father, the Emperor. No one disobeyed the Emperor, not even his only daughter. The next day, Lyra stood at the landing bay in silence. Cold air swept down from the snowy cliffs behind her. Soldiers stood in perfect lines as a sleek black Earth ship descended slowly from the clouds. Its engines hissed as it landed on the platform. The door opened. A tall human man stepped out. He wore dark armor, not heavy, but built for speed and battle. His eyes scanned the crowd, but stopped when they landed on her. Lyra looked at him with a mixture of disgust and curiosity. So this was the human? He bowed respectfully. "Princess," he said simply. His voice was deep, but calm. She didn't answer. She turned and walked toward the palace. He followed behind, saying nothing. Inside the palace, they sat across from each other. The room was full of guards and servants, but it felt like a battlefield. "You know I don't want this," Lyra said coldly. Jace nodded. "I was told." "Then why are you here?" "I follow orders," he said. "But I won't hurt you. I'm not here to force anything." Lyra stared at him. He didn't act like the loud, dangerous humans she had seen on screens. He was quiet, calm, controlled, but still human. That night, Lyra stood on her balcony, looking at the stars. Her mind was full of anger. She was a princess, a warrior, a leader, and now she was being given to a human like a gift. Suddenly, she heard a sound, a strange buzz. She turned just in time to see a small flying machine zoom toward her. It had a needle, sharp and glowing. Assassin drone. She ducked, but the drone turned, aiming for her again. Before she could move, bang. The drone exploded in mid-air. Jace stood behind her, his arm still raised. Smoke rose from the small plasma pistol in his hand. "Are you hurt?" he asked, stepping closer. Lyra stared at him, shocked. "You protected me? I heard the drone. I ran," he said. "That thing was made to kill." Lyra looked at the pieces of the drone scattered on the floor. She could smell the burnt metal. "Why did you risk your life?" she asked slowly. "You're my wife now. At least ... "In their eyes," Jace said. "And I don't let my people die." His words were simple, but something in the way he said them stayed in her heart. She had known many warriors, many who claimed to serve her, but none had ever jumped in front of a weapon for her. Certainly not a human. Later that night, Lyra sat alone in her chambers, still thinking about what had happened. She touched the spot where the drone had aimed for her neck. She should have died, but the human saved her. Why? What kind of creature risks himself for someone who hates him? She didn't have answers, but one thing was sure now. This human was not what she expected. And deep inside her chest, for the first time in many years, She felt something strange, not fear, anger, curiosity, asterisk, the human's eyes, the snow. Outside the palace fell like soft feathers from the sky. Everything was white and silent. It was the kind of silence that made people think deeply, even a princess. Princess Lyra sat in her private transport ship as it glided through the mountain pass. The royal palace had ordered her to visit the Peace Temple on the edge of Veleron territory. It was part of a ritual for all royal weddings, and as required, the human was with her. Jace sat across from her, quiet as always. His black armor was dusted with snow. He didn't speak unless spoken to. He didn't stare at her. He just watched the world pass outside the window like a soldier on duty. Lyra couldn't stop glancing at him. She hated that she was curious. She hated that he had saved her life. Most of all, she hated that he didn't act like he was proud of it. No arrogance. No gloating. No smug human grin. Why? The transport stopped at a small outpost. Soldiers stepped out to scan the area. As Lyra waited inside, she noticed something strange. Jace had taken off one of his gloves. His hand was shaking. "You're injured," she said before she could stop herself. Jace looked at her, surprised. "Just a burn from the drone yesterday. Nothing serious." She raised an eyebrow. "You didn't report it." "I didn't think it mattered," he said. She looked at him carefully. His eyes were tired. Not weak, but heavy. Like he carried something more than weapons. What kind of soldier ignores pain? She asked. "The kind who's used to worse," he said simply. Didn't reply. But something shifted in her. She had been raised by warriors, trained by killers. But even they complained when things hurt. This man didn't. That night, the guards made a camp by a frozen river. The wind was strong, and the temperature dropped fast. Jace built a fire. He moved with skill-fast hands, calm steps, no wasted movement. Lyra sat across from him under a thermal field, watching him carefully. He placed a small cooking unit over the fire. The scent of warming food filled the air. She had expected human. Food to smell terrible. It didn't. Jace passed her a heated pack. "It's vegetable protein." "No meat," he said. "You think I won't eat meat? I read your file. Your culture respects the life of mountain creatures." She blinked. "You studied my people?" "I study everyone I fight beside ... or protect." Lyra didn't speak. She opened the food pack slowly. It was bland, but warm. And somehow, it made her chest feel less cold. As the fire burned low, Lyra looked up at the stars. Her planet had 2 moons tonight. They glowed like silver coins. "Do you miss your world?" she asked. Jac took a moment before answering. "Yes." "What do you miss most?" He didn't say weapons or power like she expected. He said rain. Real rain. Not station water. "I missed the sound of it on the roof when I couldn't sleep." Lyra looked at him again, really looked. His eyes were dark, but not dull. They had a quiet fire inside. A kind of deep pain that wasn't spoken. He didn't cry. He didn't explain. But something about his eyes told stories she couldn't hear. Suddenly, Lyra spoke without thinking. "My mother died when I was young." Jace turned to her gently, giving full attention. "She died in a crash near the ice cliffs. No one talks about it. My father never did." "That's hard," Jace said. "No words can fix that." "I didn't tell you to fix it," she said. Quickly. "I know," he said. "You just needed someone to listen." His voice was soft. No pressure. No pity. Just presence. Lyra looked down at her hands. No one had ever listened like that before. Not in the palace. Not in her family. Even her guards. Later that night, when the fire had burned to glowing embers, Lyra sat quietly beside the man she once called dirty. He didn't touch her. He didn't try to talk more. He just sat close enough to share the heat and far enough to respect her space. She looked at him, her voice almost a whisper. "You're not what I expected." Jace gave a small smile, almost hidden in the dark. "Neither are you, Princess." In that moment, for the first time since the command to marry him was given, she didn't feel trapped. She didn't feel angry. She just felt warmed out and safe and curious about the man with the quiet eyes. The cracked wall. Snowflakes fell gently across the frozen river, melting on the edges of Princess Lyra's cloak. The fire crackled beside her, casting warm shadows on the tent walls. Inside, Jace sat quietly sharpening his small utility blade. He didn't speak. He never spoke unless necessary. That silence once irritated Lyra. Now, it confused her. She had known humans to be loud, impatient, and full of pride. Soldiers especially. Yet this one moved like a shadow, calm, steady, and careful like he was. Hiding something, or maybe protecting something. She sat across from him, watching the way his hands moved, rough, scarred, but gentle. The night was colder than before, but she didn't ask for extra heat. Jace noticed and activated a secondary field generator without a word. Lyra didn't thank him. She just stared at the small device, and at him. "You don't act like a soldier," she finally said. He looked up. "How do soldiers act?" "Like weapons. Cold, proud, hungry for glory." Jace gave a half-smile. "Maybe I was like that. A long time ago. What changed you?" He looked at the fire. "I saw what pride costs." There was a silence between them again, but this time it felt softer. Later, as the guards settled outside for the night, Lyra stepped outside her tent. She found Jace sitting on a rock near the cliff edge, looking out at the stars. She walked up slowly, careful not to seem too interested. "You don't sleep much," she said. "Not anymore," he replied. "Old habit? From war?" He nodded. "Dreams don't let you rest when you've seen too much." Lyra hesitated, then sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. The wind howled quietly in the valley below. Far in the distance, lights from ancient alien towers flickered ruins from a forgotten age. Jace spoke first this time. "I was 12 when my first war started." Lyra turned to him, surprised. 12? He nodded. "Earth was attacked. Small colony outpost. I wasn't a soldier then, just a kid. But war doesn't care about age. It makes soldiers from anyone it touches." Lyra said nothing. "I lost my home, my mother, my little brother." A long pause. "No one came to help us," he said quietly. "No galactic treaty. No princess. Just us and the ashes." She looked at him carefully. His face was calm, but his voice carried old pain. "You don't hate us?" she asked. Jace shook his head. "I did, for a while, but hate eats everything. I got tired of being empty." Lyra looked away. Her people had ruled this part of the galaxy for centuries. They had crushed rebellions, taken worlds, controlled trade routes. She had never once questioned it until now, until she sat beside a man who had every reason to hate her, but didn't. The next morning, they traveled on foot across a narrow ice bridge. Their transport couldn't pass the frozen path. They would reach the Peace Temple by midday. Jace walked beside her, always scanning, always aware. His presence felt steady like the mountain beneath her feet. They reached the middle of the bridge, when a sharp sound echoed above them. The ice shifted. "Move!" Jace shouted. He grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her forward, just as a chunk of the bridge shattered behind them. They ran, snow flying, boots sliding, heartbeats racing. They made it across just as the bridge gave way behind them, the sound like thunder crashing. Breathing hard, Lyra looked back at the destroyed path. she would have fallen. She knew that Dot, and once again he had pulled her to safety. She turned to him. Her voice was low, but full of something new. "You saved me again." "I told you," he said simply. "You're my responsibility." She stepped closer. "Even if I'm cruel to you?" "Yes. Even if I hate your kind?" Jace looked her in the eyes. "Kindness doesn't ask for payment, Princess." Those words, they struck like lightning through her. Later, as they reached the ancient stone gates of the Peace Temple, Lyra walked ahead, but she stopped at the entrance. She turned around and faced him. "There's a story my mother once told." "Hmm?" she said. "About a flower that only grows in the harshest winter. It blooms where no other life can." She looked at him. "I think you're like that flower." Jace didn't smile. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than any word. That night, inside the warm halls of the Peace Temple, Lyra couldn't sleep. She stared at the glowing ceiling, her thoughts tangled like vines. She had hated him, feared him, rejected everything he stood for. But now, the wall inside her heart was starting to crack. Not because of speeches, not because of commands, but because of one thing: his kindness. And once that wall cracked, even a little, there was no going back. Memories in the snow. The Peace Temple was quiet, its tall silver walls echoing only the distant wind. Princess Lyra stood near one of the crystal windows, watching soft snow fall over the valley below. The temple rested at the edge of a cliff, surrounded by ancient trees and glowing lanterns. Snow had buried most of the path they had used to. Behind her, a fire burned gently in the center of the room. Jace sat beside it, fixing a small crack in his armor plate with a quiet focus. Lyra didn't speak right away. She was remembering something buried deep in her past. She finally turned to him. Her voice was softer than usual. "Do you know how I was chosen to be princess?" Jace looked up, unsure how to respond. "I thought it was because I was born to royalty," she said. "But that wasn't the full reason. I was tested when I was 5. They made me survive alone for 3 days in the Death Woods." Jace frowned. "That's brutal, for a child." "They told me it was tradition. They left me with nothing but a blade and a tracking ring. No food, no protection." She moved closer to the fire, her voice trembling slightly. "The first night, I was chased by frost wolves. I climbed a tree and stayed awake until dawn, holding the blade in my shaking hands." Jace listened quietly. "The second day, I found a wounded bird. It had a broken wing. I used my cloak to protect it from the cold. By the time they came to get me, I had saved the bird and failed the hunting trial." Her hands were clenched now. "They told me I was weak, that kindness would make me a poor queen. My father refused to speak to me for 2 weeks." She looked at Jace. "That's when I learned to be cold." Jace didn't interrupt. He only looked at her with quiet understanding. "You said kindness doesn't ask for payment," she added. "But where I'm from, kindness costs power." Jace nodded slowly. "Where I'm from, power costs your soul." Lyra sat beside him, close to the fire. She felt the heat on her face, and something else, something warmer inside her chest. Later that night, a loud howl echoed through the valley. The guards stood at attention. Lyra and Jace stepped out of the temple to look down the snowy path. Massive shadow moved in the distance. Something big, something fast. A snowstalker. Lyra's eyes widened. It shouldn't be this close to the temple. The alien beast stepped into view twice the size of a speeder. It had 6 legs, razor-sharp fangs, and thick fur like armor. It wasn't hunting randomly. It was tracking something. One of the guards opened fire. The creature dodged and leapt behind a tree. "It's not here for a fight," Jace said. "It's following a scent." Lyra's heart skipped. The child. They had passed through a refugee camp 2 days ago, one of the guards had rescued an orphaned alien child hiding in the snow. That child now rested in the back hall of the temple, too weak to travel. It must have followed us from the wildlands. Lyra said Dot without thinking. She ran inside to the hall where the child slept. The beast struck the temple gate. Jace pulled his rifle and ran forward, shouting to the guards, "Form a line. Focus fire. Keep it away from the eastern wing." The stalker roared and charged. Snow flew up as plasma shots lit the air. Inside, Lyra reached the child's chamber. The small girl, barely more than a baby, was crying softly under the blanket. Picked her up, wrapping her cloak tightly around her. She looked out the window. Jace was standing in front of the creature now, drawing its attention, his gun aimed but not firing yet. He was shouting, walking backward, pulling it away from the temple. "What are you doing?" she whispered to herself. The snow stalker charged at him. He jumped aside, rolled through the snow, and fired a stun blast into its shoulder. The creature screamed and thrashed out the guards, hit it with 2 more shots. Finally, it collapsed in the snow. Jac. He stood still, breathing heavily, his armor scratched and steaming. When Lyra stepped outside with the child in her arms, she looked at him for a long time. He was leaning on his weapon, tired but calm. "You could have died," she said. He shrugged. She needed to live. Lyra stared at him, really stared. His armor was old. His body was marked by war. But his heart? His heart was stronger than any soldier she had ever known. "You're not like anyone I've met," she said. "You're not either," he replied. She stepped closer and handed him the child. He held the small alien girl gently, like holding something sacred. Lyra didn't say another word. She didn't need to, because in that moment, something inside her broke. The coldness she had built over years was cracking. And for the first time since she was a child, she smiled, not out of duty, not out of control, but because she felt safe, and that was because of a human. Heartbeats at midnight. Midnight fell softly on the snow-covered Peace Temple. The fire inside had burned down to glowing embers. Outside, the winds howled through the mountain cliffs, but within the ancient walls, it was quiet, almost sacred. "Princess." Lyra stood at the far end of the corridor, her hand pressed gently against the cold window glass. She was wide awake. Sleep had escaped her, replaced by a storm of thoughts she couldn't silence. Behind her, down the hallway, she heard footsteps. Soft, measured. She didn't turn right away. "I couldn't sleep either," came Jace's voice. Lyra slowly looked over her shoulder. He stood by the doorway, dressed in a simple dark undershirt and loose tactical pants. Without armor, he looked smaller but not weaker. His presence still felt strong, like the quiet of a deep forest or the weight of a mountain. She gave a small nod and turned back toward the window. Jace walked forward and stood beside her. The stars outside sparkled across the dark sky. Twin moons hung above the mountains like 2 watchful eyes. After a long silence, she spoke. "Why don't you fear?" "Me?" He turned slightly. "Should I? I was raised to rule, to command. People fear me, even those who claim to love me. But you," she shook her head, "you act like I'm just another person." "Maybe you are," Jace said quietly. She frowned. "I'm a princess." "You're also someone who saved a bird instead of killing it," he replied, his voice soft. She was stunned. He remembered. No one had ever spoken of that memory, not even her father. For a while, neither of them spoke. They just stood there in silence together, but not touching, like 2 stars slowly drifting into the same orbit. Later, they sat by the small fire pit in the center of the temple. Lyra leaned back on her hands, her cloak open, the cold no longer bothering her. Jace sat across, arms resting on his knees, watching the flickering flames. She looked at him carefully. His face was lit by the firelight, shadows dancing along his jawline. He looked older tonight, not in age, but in spirit, like someone who had carried burdens far too heavy for too long. "I want to ask you something," she said. He nodded. "Why?" "Did you say yes?" Jace raised an eyebrow. "To the marriage?" She nodded slowly. He thought for a while, then said, "Because I wanted peace. And because I wanted to see if all the stories were wrong." "What stories?" "That alien royalty." "Can't feel." Lyra blinked. He looked at her, eyes steady. "I didn't believe that." "I still don't." She felt her breath catch for just a second. "No one ever asks how I feel," she whispered. "Not truly. Not honestly." "I'm asking now." Lyra stared into the fire. "I feel confused." "Why?" "Because you're not what I was. Taut. You're kind. You listen. You see me like I'm not just a title." Jace leaned forward slightly. "You're not." Lyra's throat tightened. Her hands felt cold even though the fire was warm. "I'm afraid," she admitted, voice barely a whisper. He tilted his head. "Of what?" "That if I trust you, it will hurt." He didn't answer right away. But then he spoke, slowly and gently. "Then let me earn that trust, one step at a time." The fire crackled between them. The air was still. Then something surprising happened. Lyra reached out and placed her hand lightly, carefully over his .jace. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just turned his palm upward and closed his fingers softly around hers. No force. No demand. Just quiet acceptance. Her heart beat louder than the wind outside. It wasn't the touch that shook her. It was the fact that she had wanted it. She didn't know when it happened, but somewhere between the ice bridge, the peace temple, the snow stalker, and his soft words, she had begun to change. Not because he fought for her, not because he obeyed her, but because he saw her. Later, as she returned to her sleeping chamber, she stood at the door and looked back one last time. Jace was still sitting by the fire, watching the flames. His face looked tired, but peaceful. She touched her chest, right above her heart, and whispered something to herself. "Why does it feel warmer when he's near?" In the darkness of the hall, one of the temple guards stood quietly, watching them both from the shadows. He touched a small hidden device behind his ear and whispered, "There," growing close. "The princess is no longer resisting." A cold voice replied through the channel. "Then we move to phase 2. When they leave the temple, make sure the human doesn't survive the return." The betrayer. The morning after the snow stalker. Attack was quiet. Too quiet. The peace temple stood under a pale sky. Snow had stopped falling, but heavy clouds hovered above like a warning. The mountain air was cold and still. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. Princess Lyra stood on the stone balcony, dressed in a dark blue ceremonial cloak. Her silver hair was tied back, and her eyes scanned the white valley. Behind her, the last preparations for their return journey were being made. They were leaving the temple, returning to the capital, and soon the wedding would happen. She touched her chest softly. Something inside her had changed. She could no longer deny it. The human Jace had cracked the walls she spent a lifetime building. Not with weapons, not with threats, but with patience, kindness, and a strange, quiet strength that no alien lord had ever shown her. She didn't say it out loud, not yet, but a part of her was beginning to want him near. Jace walked through the main corridor, checking his gear. He had reattached his shoulder armor and reset the field. Generators on Lyra's travels slid. He moved with focus, but his mind was heavy. He had started this mission expecting nothing but political drama. A cold marriage, a fake treaty, a quiet return. Instead, he found something real. Lyra. She wasn't just a royal figure or a cold-hearted ruler. She was brave. She had depth. She had pain she never showed the world. And now, Jace felt something dangerous rising in his chest. He didn't want to just protect her. He wanted to stay as the guards packed the sleds. One of them, a tall Veleron soldier named Kale, moved quietly between the shadows. His armor looked the same as the others, but inside his chestplate was a hidden device. It blinked red, counting down silently. Kale wasn't a loyal guard. He was an agent, sent by a faction that hated the peace deal. A group that believed the royal family was weakening the Empire by bonding with Earth, and his orders were clear: kill the human. Make it look like an accident. Break the treaty. Kale's eyes stayed, cold as he loaded the sleds with false data logs and tracking beacons. No one suspected him. Not even Jace. The journey began before noon. 3 sleds left the Peace Temple, one carrying supplies, one for the guards, and one for Princess Lyra and Jace. They traveled along the edge of a cliff ridge. Snow fell lightly. Again. Below them, sharp rocks and frozen rivers waited silently. Lyra sat beside Jace in the lead sled, wrapped in a thick blanket. She had not spoken much, but her hand now rested close to his. She didn't pull away when their fingers brushed, and she didn't avoid his gaze. They were still royalty and soldier, but something between them had shifted. Jace looked over at her. "You're quiet." "I'm thinking," she said. "About?" She hesitated, then said softly, "About what happens when we return." He nodded slowly. "You don't have to marry me if you don't want to." She turned to him, surprised. "I thought you had to follow orders." "I do," he said. "But that doesn't mean I want to trap someone into something they hate." Her eyes searched his. "What if I don't hate it anymore?" He didn't answer, but his hand gently closed over hers. The silence that followed was louder than any words. Moments later, the sled jolted. A blast rocked the ice path. The second sled exploded in a ball of fire behind him. Guards screamed, "Ice!" Cracked. The sled tipped sideways. "Hold on!" Jace shouted, grabbing Lyra and covering her with his body as the sled rolled. It hit the edge of the cliff and slid grinding against frozen stone before it slammed into a boulder and stopped. Jace coughed, lifting himself off Lyra. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No, just shaken." He helped her up. The other sleds were gone. Smoke rose from the cliffside. 2 guards were dead, and Kale, the tall Veleron, stood in the snow with a plasma spear drawn. His helmet was off. His eyes were wild. "Princess," Kale shouted, "step away from that human." Lyra narrowed her eyes. "What is this?" "He's poisoned you. Made you weak. You were born to rule, now look at you, crawling beside earth filth." Jace stood between them. "Put down the weapon." Kale laughed. "You're nothing but a political tool. The moment this peace fails, Earth will throw you aside." He pointed the plasma spear at Jace. "But I'll make sure you don't live to see that." He fired. Jace shoved Lyra aside and rolled, just avoiding the blast. Snow exploded where he had stood. Kale charged. Jace met him with a blade drawn from his belt. The 2 clashed blade against spears spinning and slashing through the snow. Jace's strikes were fast, but Kale was stronger. The spear sliced across Jace's shoulder, burning through his armor. Jace growled, pain shooting through him. Lyra grabbed a fallen guard's pistol and aimed it at Kale, but she hesitated. Wrong shot could kill Jace too. Kale raised the spear for a final strike. Lyra screamed, "Jace down!" Jace dropped to one knee. Lyra fired. The shot hit Kale directly in the chest. He flew backward, smoke rising from his armor. He collapsed into the snow. UNMOVING. Silence. JACE panted heavily. Blood dripped from his arm. Lyra dropped the pistol and ran to him. "You're bleeding," she said. He smiled weakly. Takes more than that to break me. She looked into his. Eyes face pale, hands shaking. I could have lost you. But you didn't, he whispered Dot, and for the first time, she kissed him. Not because of duty, not because of peace, but because her heart, against all rules and logic, had chosen him.